Hello, and welcome back to After the Anime. We are continuing our discussion of what happens in Hunter x Hunter after the anime is over. It's been a minute since our last video, mainly because my computer crashed and I lost everything. So I'm going to give you a brief rundown of everything we had gone over, some of the important points. If you'll remember, Mezaistum had recruited Kurapika to become part of the Zodiac 12, as a reference from Leorio. Ging wants Beyond's men to accept money to make him the number 2 in charge of Beyond's men. And we saw 4th Prince Zoraidnik's true colors, as he is a murderer for the sake of his art. So without further ado, let's get into it and see what happens next. So we open the chapter with Kurapika and Mezaistum actually making it to the Hunters Association after their long car drive and meeting up with Leorio. And so now that everyone's here, Cheadle can begin the meeting among all the Zodiacs about what they're going to do about the Dark Continent expedition. So Cheadle starts the meeting going over their mission and what the objective is, which is to overcome any threats that the Dark Continent provides and to bring back something of value for mankind. And then there's also Beyond, who the Zodiacs have agreed they want to take him to the pretend new continent, which, if you'll remember from earlier on, is one of the uninhabited islands right by the border of the Dark Continent, but not all the way there. And the Zodiacs haven't yet agreed whether or not to take Beyond with them to the actual Dark Continent. She starts reiterating the threats that the Dark Continent provides, and Leorio starts to fully realize the danger of what they're in for. Kurapika interjects because he has a question about Beyond, stating, "Beyond obviously has allies within the Hunters Association. Do you know how many?" And this catches the Zodiacs off guard. Now Kurapika kind of explains himself and says that we know Beyond has been waiting for Isaac Netero's death, and the fact that he's turned himself in means that he thinks he can control this whole project even from confinement. So to do that, he would have to have a ton of support within the Hunters Association. After Kurapika says this, Mezaistum asks him to step out of the room for a sec to have a chat. Now, once away from the other Zodiacs, Mezaistum tells Kurapika he agrees that there is probably an informant within the Hunters Association, but him and Cheadle haven't told the rest of the Zodiacs about it yet. And that's when Kurapika realizes, you think that there's a spy within the Zodiacs. Mezaistum explains his reasoning, saying that this all started with Beyond planning this trip over 50 years ago when the oldest of the Zodiacs was still a child. So that means that if Beyond started as soon as Netero said wait until I'm dead, almost all of the hunters in the association are suspect. This is also why Kurapika and Leorio were picked, because they probably don't have anything to do with Beyond given their circumstances. So Mezaistum asks him to just keep this between us for right now. So when they return to the meeting, all of the Zodiacs are going around the table explaining what their roles in this expedition will be. They go through every single one. I'll just highlight a few for you, such as Cheadle, who is going to be in charge of organizing the top medical team. Mezaistum is going to be doing background checks of all the passengers on the Black Whale, which is the ship that they're taking to the Dark Continent, named for pretty obvious reasons. Sayu states that he doesn't have much, but he's confident he can supervise Beyond all by himself. And Jinta brings up some names that we already know, saying that Nov has said that he won't go past the fake new continent, but Moral's team will handle the ocean travel from the new continent to the trip to the gate. Leorio states that he's glad that the member participation in the Hunters Association has gone up, knowing that Leorio's a part of it, and that he'll do his best to support Cheadle. And then Kurapika apologizes for insinuating that there are spies in the Hunters Association, and that he says he'll use his underworld connections to get all sorts of info that they might need. And Cheadle announces that the Hunters exam is going to be changed as to only recruit people who are going to be necessary for this journey. She tells everyone to do their best and to get to it. After that, we cut to 1 month later at Beyond's castle. And Ging is hanging out with all of Beyond's men, and he's trying to gain their trust in order to get them to accept the money and make him the number 2 in charge. And this involves doing all sorts of things, from playing video games with them to playing these aura games where they create these little pips of aura that go across their hands, and Ging just shows off his aura prowess to everybody basically. And he also competes in this ancient language game with Curly, who we learn is a Varvard professor. And by beating them in all of these games and proving his competency, his excellence, he's gaining a lot of their trust little by little. And that's when Periston shows up and, in Periston fashion, cheerfully states that the Hunter's exam has ended and all of Beyond's assassins have failed. He even gives a compliment to Kurapika here, stating that the one who replaced him in the Zodiacs is very competent at what they're doing. And that's when a new character enters who is the top mercenary in charge of all the soldiers in Beyond's team. and excuse me if I mess up the name, but I believe it's Muir, states that it's like that they could read minds and they were able to siphon out all of their assassins they tried to get through the Hunters Association exam. He even states that they might have found out Beyond's escape plan if it had been told to them. Which Periston gladly informs us that there is no escape plan for Beyond. He's just going to do it, and they'll meet him at the Dark Continent. Muir turns his attention to Ging and tells him basically just to get out because he's from the Hunters Association, and he doesn't trust him. So Ging tries to clear the air by explaining himself and his motive. He says, since I want to be free to do whatever I want when I get to the Dark Continent, I lean towards Beyond rather than the Hunters Association. The difference between me and Beyond is his mission ends when he gets something to take back to humanity. In the worst case scenario, I don't have to come back from the Dark Continent. And then there's Periston, who Ging states he knows just wants destruction. So he's basically here to help Beyond and to deter Periston, and asks Muir if that's something he can accept. But Muir still shuts him down, even with Beyond's other men vouching for him. So that's when the rest of Muir's soldiers show up and they give him an ultimatum. They say 1, Periston leaves, or 2, Ging leaves. And then Ging and Periston give some other options, saying 3, you guys leave, or 4, you guys die. And we open the next chapter with the men giving them a 5th option, which is both of you guys die. And they conjure some weapons out of Nen and start spraying Nen bullets everywhere, while Ging and Periston run into the basement. Once they're down there, Periston suggests they may need to fight back, and Ging notices that they're emitters who conjure their own weapons, which he says should be a piece of cake. Ging, having the swift mind that he does, knows that conjuration and emission are on opposite ends of the Nen wheel. So basically, if they're emitters, they're spending a lot of Nen to conjure these weapons that's getting wasted. So because of this, he's pretty confident in his ability to take them out. So as Jing's getting ready to fight them, Periston asks him, are you sure you want to let me see your ability? Because seeing someone's Nen ability is a very big advantage if you're ever going to have to fight them, especially if they don't know what yours is. But Ging says, nah, I shouldn't have a problem with this, and he punches the ground a whole lot, and the aura from those punches starts to travel through the floor. And that's when Periston realizes this is Leorio's move that he punched Ging with. And sure enough, those punches come out of the floor and nail all these mercenaries. And so Periston asks him, is your Nen ability to copy other people's Nen abilities? And Ging says, no, this is just a talent I have. I can get punched with something and pretty much figure out however that works. So this isn't even Jing's actual Nen ability. He just is so talented with Nen, again being called one of the top 5 Nen users in the world, that he's able to take a hit, analyze it, and reproduce it just on his own. So Ging begins to show this mastery he has over Nen by extrapolating what other abilities Leorio may have come up with, being that he's going to become a doctor. He figures he would use this ultrasound type thing to feel tumors through skin, and he uses it through the walls to detect mercenaries. And then he thinks, well, to get to tumors you can't get to surgically, maybe he would emit blasts of aura, and he uses that to take out the last 2 soldiers. So again, using that ultrasound ability, Ging determines that no one's left, and Periston suggests, well, maybe they just gave up. And Ging says, no, they probably just think they accomplished what you asked them to. And so again, Ging just goes and lays bare Periston's plan to have them attack them, to see what Jing's abilities were. And that's probably why he used Leorio's abilities rather than his own. Ging says, I just went along with this because they had such a bad script that you gave them. But if you want to see my ability, next time, do it yourself. And we see Periston get more and more annoyed. So Ging goes back upstairs and basically makes fun of Muir's acting. And he expresses his concern that those men who attacked me, they're not going to be able to survive on the Dark Continent. The best they can do is provide support. Which Muir responds with, yeah, they are support. This guy does the shooting. And we're introduced to Golem, who apparently conjures heavy weapons and has a ride-along emitter who generates the Nen bullets. And so this would make more sense to use 2 people for this because, like we said before, the conjuration and emission being on separate ends of the Nen wheel, if you have one person doing the conjuring, one person doing the emitting, it's a lot more efficient. And we learn it was Golem who conjured the weapons that they used against Ging and Periston. And I know that's not a whole lot of explanation of Golem and why he looks just like a machine, but that's all we really get. And so Ging asks Muir, if you lead the soldiers, you can tell them to take the money I'm offering, right? And so this is where Muir and Ging get into a discussion about Jing's methods, and we learn more about his motives. Miura explains, I wouldn't have a problem with you being number 2 if you hadn't offered the money. And he turns responsibility back on Ging. He says, you know that mercenaries value trust more than anything, and offering money is just kind of an insult to all of that. He says, some of my men wanted to leave as soon as they heard what you said, and honestly, I'm pretty upset about it too. You gotta explain this to me if you want to be number 2. So Ging apologizes, says he can't take it back now, he's already paid others. But what if he offers it to a charity? And this charity specifically is for the families of fallen mercenaries. And it would actually require Ging to have to become a mercenary himself and give up some of his freedoms just to create this account to give money to these mercenary families. And this confuses Miura even more. He says, why do you want to give us this money so badly that we don't even want? And in Ging fashion, he says, sometimes I run my mouth first and come up with reasons later. That's kind of just what happened. But we do get a little look here into what Jing's motivations actually are. He says he figured that nobody would be going to the Dark Continent with Beyond just for money. So if they accepted his money, it really meant that they were accepting him. And he was happy to finally be surrounded by like-minded idiots. And notice the language here, like-minded idiots. It's the third time we've heard it through these chapters. This time when he said about Dawn Freaks that there's idiots in every age. And then even before, when the Zodiacs were talking about him, saying that I only know one such idiot, meaning that the Zodiacs did not consider themselves idiots like Ging. So it seems that among Beyond's men, Ging has found more of a belonging and more of a family than he ever had with the Zodiacs. So he continues that first he was mad about Beyond's interference in this voyage that he was so looking forward to. So he came here to lodge a complaint, but he surprised himself when the first thing he said was, let me in on it. And then he admits, I offered the money because I thought it'd be cool. So he basically sums it up for Miura again, saying, I have a history with Periston. I do want to stop his schemes, and I want to help Beyond's plan. So after all this and the offer for donations, Miura finally accepts this, but he makes it clear that Miura's in charge of the soldiers, and since he's going to be a soldier, his orders are absolute on the battlefield. To which Ging gives a cheeky little affirmative too. Periston then confirms that it's official, money's been transferred, and he congratulates Ging on being number 2. And Ging reminds him, it's name only. Periston, you can still lead. But Periston refuses, saying, I want to see what you can do. So Ging did it. He is number 2 in charge of Beyond's men, and he's the one who gets to call the orders instead of Periston. And next we open with Cheadle's new hunter's exam. And Cheadle, Mezaistem, and Karapika through this exam are trying to weed out Beyond's spies going to the Dark Continent. So it seems we're jumping back in time just a little bit since Miura had already told us that they all failed. They do this by showing the announcement that the Kakian Empire made about going to the Dark Continent and asking all of the applicants if they had some knowledge of this prior to the announcement being made. Karapika uses his dowsing chain, which we know as a lie detector using Nen, and he uses it on videos of the answers the applicants are making. He explains that his scarlet eyes through Emperor time allow him to use this through video and not just in person. Now he's not just looking to see if they lie or tell the truth, because there's some who lie, say that they knew what was going to happen, and Karapika still passes them anyway. He's actually looking for people who did know something before the announcement to see if they were probably part of Beyond's crew and eliminate them that way. So Mezaistem tells Karapika he's pretty amazed. It seems like your ability was just made for this. It's perfect. Karapika clarifies it's still possible that I missed some. He says my ability detects when people are lying, but if someone messed with their memories and they don't know that they're lying, I probably couldn't tell. So Karapika brings up the possibility if someone erased their memories of being a spy, it's possible they could still get through and then somehow accomplish their mission through someone else's Nen ability to reactivate them or something like that. And in the middle of this conversation, we cut to 4th Prince Zoraidnik again. And just a little warning here, this is where we start to introduce more and more princes, which is going to be a thing very soon. And I don't want you to worry about if you have trouble remembering who is who or who did what. I had a hard time following all the princes the first time I read it, but that's why I'm here, so you don't have to worry about that. So getting into it, fourth Prince Zodiac is, living in luxury, drinking champagne and listening to music and watching a lady get a back tattoo, apparently, when he gets a call from his big brother, first Prince Benjamin. And our first shot of Prince Benjamin kind of encapsulates who he is as he's calling his brother on the phone while wrestling a lion. Kind of the ultimate macho man. And so Benjamin tells him, Dad agreed to the deal. The sole survivor of the voyage will be the next king. So this voyage is getting set up for these princes kind of to be a battle royale to where the last one standing becomes the king of the Kakin Empire. This gets Prince Zodiac excited. Him and Benjamin start exchanging threats to kill each other. First Prince Benjamin swears at him, and then Zodiac hangs up and says that men who swear indiscriminately are like girls who say like all the time. And basically comparing Prince Benjamin to a valley girl. And that's when Prince Zodiac gets a call from Theta, who's kind of his right-hand man, for lack of a better term, since she's not a man. But she explains to him that all 5 of the bodyguards that took the hunter's exam passed. She explains that they were told lying would result in elimination, so they told the Hunters Association all about the succession and what's going on between all the princes. Then Zodiac correctly guesses that first Prince Benjamin and sixth Prince Tyson did not send guards to the hunter's exam. So he explains this is probably because of first Prince Benjamin's pride. He doesn't want anyone judging his superior soldiers. And then because of sixth Prince Tyson's envy, Tyson doesn't want anyone else to have their soldiers in any kind of way. He asked Theta if anyone failed, which she does explain that 7th Prince Lazarus's men did fail, and yes, that is all his hair. And Zodiac guesses that he probably told his men about assassination beforehand, so when they lied about it at the Hunters Association, they probably failed. So he tells Theta, get the floor plans, get ready for this journey, we're going to win this. And then we cut back basically right where we left off with Mezaistem and Karapika's conversation. And Mezaistem states he doesn't believe anyone in the Zodiacs has the ability to erase memories. He says if they could, some of the more competent people probably wouldn't have failed, and he even gives the example of Muir, that if someone could erase Muir's memories, they probably would have so he could pass the Hunter's exam. But Mezaistem thinks that Periston left the Hunters Association so easily after the election because there is a spy already in place in the Zodiacs. And at this, Karapika agrees to test the Zodiacs in secret to see if one of them's a spy. Mezaistem does this by gathering all the Zodiacs to a meeting, except for Karapika and Leorio, and telling him that they're there to share their abilities for security reasons. But he's frank with them. He asks, are you okay with sharing your abilities knowing there might be a spy among us? And Kanzai, the tiger guy, takes offense to this and gets pretty mad about the suggestion that one of them could be a spy. But Mezaistem tries to calm him down and also dissuade the others' concerns by explaining that, if I had been approached by Beyond before I had heard Isaac Netero's message, I would have gladly helped him. It's not about trust or betrayal, it's just a matter of the sequence of events. So he starts things off by revealing his own ability. He says, I use these cards to restrict people's actions, blue admits them to the courtroom, yellow puts them under his control, and red dismisses them from the courtroom. And so all this time, Karapika is watching the meeting through the security cameras. And so just like during the Hunter's exam, he's using his dowsing chain and Emperor time to pass them and see if they're telling the truth about their abilities. And so most of them keep passing until it finally moves, and we find out that Beyond's informant is Sayu. So Sayu has been in the Hunters Association, being an informant for Beyond, we assume in a similar way that Periston was doing. And so that's it. That is the end of the Dark Continent Expedition arc. I know, not much of an actual ending or anything, it just kind of stops. And really it's not much of an arc either, it's just kind of a setup for the next arc, which is the current arc that the manga is going through, which is the Succession War arc. So next time we will learn more about the princes and see what's going to be happening on this voyage during the Succession War. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you again for your patience and that this video has taken a little bit longer to get out, and the next one might as well, just because I'm gathering all my resources again. But if you want to be around for that next one, be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, because we are getting into the more confusing part of it, especially when we get into the princes, be sure to leave your question in the comments and I'll reply, and we'll do our best to understand this together. Thank you guys very much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Adios.